Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here for our final review of Bridgerton Season 1. This is Episode 8, and it begins with Lady Whistledown. The fastest courtship upon record occurred during the markedly wet season of 1804, when Mrs. Mary Leopold secured a betrothal over a plate of sugared almonds and licorice in just 4.5 minutes. Of course, Miss Leopold and her new husband would leave London mere hours after their wedding. Reasons unknown. Of all that I have imparted to you, dear reader, there is but one bit of wisdom you must heed most. One can never know the truth of a marriage hiding behind closed doors. As she's narrating, we see some of the married couples like the Featheringtons, and she's upset because they're broke, and Will and his wife Alice, and he is looking like he's contemplating life because last episode we know that Lord Featherington made a suggestion to him. She continues. Beware indeed, blushing newlyweds. You know not what the future awaits. Will there be hardships or indignity, she continues, or will one's future see the rarest accomplishment of all, a true love match? And that is when we get a shot of Lady Bridgerton, who we know was married but is now a widow, as she turns over to the bed and she caresses the pillow that is not occupied by her husband because he's no longer there. And she's in bed by herself. Because unlike some of the others, she actually did have a true love match. Lady Whistledown continues. As for which of these fates await the eager matches of the season of 1813, only two things will tell. Time, and as always, this author. We see Daphne and Simon getting their portrait done because back then, in order to get a portrait, we didn't have the luxury of, iPhones and Androids and the different various cameras that we have now with all these different megapixels and things of that nature. Back then, a lot of people stood around and posed as their portrait was painted. So these two don't even seem to want to be standing next to each other. They look very uncomfortable. They're having various conversations. He lets Daphne know that he is ready to leave, but she tells him, you can't leave yet. We still have to host this ball, and I want to make sure that we go when everyone else goes so they don't have, something to talk about. While posing for the picture, the artist, I believe it is Grenville, I can't remember his name, the one that we've previously seen, sees that they don't look happy, feels like the shot isn't working the right way, and he suggests that they switch poses. So he tells Simon to put his hand on Daphne's shoulder. As he does, they stare into each other's eyes, and of course, because these two actually do love each other, the artist sees the connection that the two of them have, and he realizes it's a love match. There's a lot going on in this episode, so there are some things that I'm going to skip out of order just to get past that character. And then there are times where you'll notice in my notes, I jump back and forth. So let's start with Morena. Despite her concoction that she created with the different herbs that we saw her grabbing in the kitchen, she is not deceased. We see her in the room as she's gathering things and Penelope is talking to her, and we hear her say she is no longer with child. I don't know what made her feel this way, because we did see her grabbing what looked like it could have been a sheet, but you couldn't quite tell because of the angle of the TV. But she was stuffing something from off of her bed into something else. Marina, like all of the other women, apparently didn't know diddly poo, because she feels like she would have felt something moving around by now, and she hasn't felt anything. But I don't feel like she got confirmation to know that she successfully terminated her pregnancy from a doctor. She just assumed that it was a success. So we see her apologize to Penelope for what she did, and she tells her, one day Colin will see you. We see Penelope, after she says this, look out of the window because a gentleman has arrived. We find out later that it is Mr. Crane. And I was like, oh my goodness, the baby father has shown up. And I got so excited for her. But then I looked at the face and I was like, wait a second. And we realized it is Mr. Crane, but it is not George Crane, who is the person that Marina loves. Instead, it's his brother, Sir Philip. He's there to inform Marina that George died on the battlefield several weeks ago. As he's telling Lady Featherington that he is not George, he's his brother, you see Marina storm off and Daphne follows behind her, because Daphne was at the market when Lady Featherington was approached to be told that they have a visitor at the house. So you hear Marina say, he was writing to me, George, to tell me he loved me, to tell me we could run away together and marry and have our child. Sir Philip found his half-written letter amongst George's belongings after he, if it were not for your recent inquiries, Sir Philip would have never known I was here, and I never would have known George. He loved me. All this time, he loved me. I thought him a villain, but he was not. He had a perfectly reasonable explanation for not writing back to me, and I was wrong. And she walks away and she's crying. And in that scene, you could feel her heartbreak at the realization that she went through all these ups and downs, upset, mad, feeling like this man didn't love her, feeling like he abandoned her, was ready to marry Colin, all this other stuff, when the whole time the man had passed. Later on in the episode, we see Philip propose to Marina. And I'm like, okay, no, this isn't weird at all. Your brother was with her, now you're proposing to her. But apparently this is something that they sometimes did. He says, George very much cared for you, Miss Thompson. And that will never change. But he would have wanted you to be looked after. He would have wanted you to be supported. Allow me to realize my late brother's wishes. She refuses. And Lady Featherington is shocked because she's like, he's of good standing. He can take care of you. This is what we wanted. She tells her she's no longer with child, so she's not participating in any more schemes. Later on, after Marina finally feels the baby, she asks for the doctor. The doctor comes and verifies that she is still pregnant. Left with no other choice because she has no income and the Featheringtons do not want her there. They want her out. She ends up deciding to leave the Featherington house and that she's going to be in a loveless marriage with Philip. You hear her ask Lady Featherington at the end of the episode, how is she able to be in a loveless marriage for 22 years, which is like 22 years that she was with that man. And she states that you live for things like your children and you find other joys, which means Lady Featherington never was happy with that man. So how sad is she really, other than the fact that she may not have certain securities? What's going on? But we'll get to it. When I talked about Marina leaving with the Featherington house and a loveless marriage of Philip, it's the same thing that she would have done had she had been with Colin. But for some reason, her being in this situation seems a little bit more harsher. It seems like it's a harder pill for her to swallow. Not just for her, but for his brother as well. Because with him deciding to marry her, that means he can marry no one else. Probably can't have any children or anything like that. So his life is ended in a way too. Okay, let's get ready to jump around a bit. So we see Daphne and her mother out shopping. She tells her that she's decided to part ways with the Duke. Her mom encourages her to forgive him and work things out. As they're out, Lady Featherington tells them that she did not receive an invite from the ball. And Lady Bridgerton is like, you know, why would you receive an invite from the ball after all that's transpired? But Daphne lets her know, like, we need to move on from the past. I'm going to, you know, invite her anyways. Right, Mama? And her mother is like, yeah, reluctantly, like, I like Lady Bridgerton in that moment. We are later back at the home of the Duke. and he lets Daphne know that he's going to meet up with Will for the boxing match. Asks her if she would like to go. She says no, she has to get ready for the ball. She then says to him, what did your father do to make you take that vow? And he tells her, like, look, let's not go down that path. Just know that I'm doing this for your own good. You're better off without me. So now Daphne is on the hunt to figure out what in the world is going on. While Simon is at the boxing match, we see Daphne digging. She's trying to figure out what happened to Simon and his dad. So she ends up going into his father's office and finding the letters that Simon had written to his father as a child. As I said in previous episodes, those letters had never been opened. We know basically that he begged for his dad to care about him, for old Dookie to care, but old Dookie didn't care. Lady Danbury arrives because she's there along with Lady Bridgerton to assist Daphne with the preparations for the ball that they're supposed to be doing. And you hear Daphne say, did you know about the letters? Lady Danbury says, I did, and now apparently so do you. Daphne says, I had no idea that Simon had trouble speaking as a child. Lady Danbury says, how could you have? He worked so very hard to eliminate the difficulty. He was, he was very proud. It is why he wrote those letters in the first place. Daphne says to keep his father informed of his progress. The late Duke never even read them? What kind of father? Lady Danbury says, one that not only expected, but demanded perfection in his son. And when that was not achieved, well, I shall leave it to you to imagine. Daphne says, Simon could not be any more different from a man such as that. Lady Danbury says, of course, we know that to be true, Your Grace. Daphne says, you helped him. You helped him overcome his impediment. Lady Danbury says, I merely showed him what he was capable of all along. And if he needed some encouragement, a push from time to time, that was something I was happy to provide. But at the end of the day, the Duke's triumph was his and his alone. It had to be. So Daphne now, based off of finding those letters, as well as the discussion that she had with Lady Danbury, who helped raise him, sees Simon on a deeper level. It's like she's seeing him for the first time. So we jump to the boxing match where we see a whole bunch of people wagering for this fight. This is the fight that Will is having with a man that Lord Featherington is calling the Beast. We hear an exchange between Will and his wife, Alice. Alice says, win this fight, and perhaps we leave this city. We can take our exhibitions all over England if we wish. He says, to continue living from fight to fight, we should be planning our future, Alice. I cannot fight forever. Our circumstance is solely dependent on how well I can pander and grovel to the likes of them. She says, Will, what are you saying? He says, perhaps I lose. Perhaps that purse will be enough to keep us happy. In other words, if I lose this one fight, then I can make enough money that I won't have to do this anymore and we'll be okay. Versus what will happen if I win. Which let us know that he possibly may have done something that he wasn't supposed to. So as he says that, he's looking at Lord Featherington. We see Featherington then approach two men who he thanks for coming. And he says to them, I was told that you two can handle sizable wagers. Because as we saw in the previous episode, he told Will if he loses, he'll give him a portion of the proceeds. He says, I want to wager on the guy that's playing against Will. The guys don't really want to take this bet because at this point, Featherington's word is no good. He has a lot of debt. people talk. They know, especially the men, that stuff is going on. His word means nothing, and they tell him his word means nothing. He says, so you don't got to take my word. Instead, you can take this. And he pulls out the deed to his house. He says, if I lose, it's yours. That's a big deal. And as soon as he did that, I was like, okay, Will, you're going to piss me off. You're basically about to throw this fight. So Simon shows up and says he's there to wish his friend luck. And he notices that something is off about Will. At the fight, you see Anthony, and he sees Sienna entertaining another guy, and he's looking bothered by what he's seeing because he's looking at her more than the fight, and she's looking at him more than the fight. She's glancing at him here and there, but trying to act like she's just staring at them fighting, but she's not. She's looking at him. We then see them end up having sex under what would be considered like the bleachers of modern day. Meanwhile, Will loses his match, and Simon knows that something isn't right immediately because he's fought with Will enough to know what Will can and can't handle. And it seems like the loan sharks know that something is up too. As the Duke is approaching where Will is at, Lord Featherington comes out of the area, which confirms the Duke's suspicion. So the Duke confronts Will because he knows that he's cheated. And he says to Will, like, if you needed, more money, why didn't you come and ask him to sponsor? He could have done that. And he says, look, don't tell me how I should do things. And he's like, what will Alice think? And he was like, I need you not to worry about my family when you need to take care of your own. We later see Featherington. He goes home and he has a whole bunch of winnings that he shows his wife. It doesn't look like regular money. It looks like other bets and stuff like that he can collect on. So he's like, you can do whatever you want because we got this money. It's another day. The Duke and Daphne are eating together at breakfast, which is something they haven't done in some time. She invites him to the Bridgerton house because her sister, Francesca, is back home. From what I understand from the quick glimpse that I saw in season 3, we're going to see more of her in that season because I didn't understand why they showed us this, but it's just to remind us that there is another child whose name starts with F. We get to see the family interact as well as how great Simon is with everyone, including her younger siblings. It's time for the ball, and we see all the decor that is being done outside as Lady Whistledown returns. The final ball of any season is distinguished by one of two things: anticipation or dread. For while those who have been successful in the year's marriage market look forward to flaunting their perfect, joyous unions, others shudder at the thought of spending one last night before the discerning eyes of the tomb, as they know indeed just what the evening signifies, that their time is officially up. And yet, to those who may still find themselves out of both choices and hope, fear not, for who knows when and where one's fortunes may change. This is where we see Anthony and Sienna laying in bed together. He asked her to come with him to the ball for the night. She's worried about what people will say. He's like, nobody's going to say anything. I'm a Viscount. My sister is married to a Duke. She's now a Duchess, but she doesn't want to go because she feels like even if they don't say anything to her, that they're going to say something to him, because women are the ones who are always looked down upon in matters like this. He later ends up going to pick her up for the ball, where she is already entertaining another man. She tells him she wanted to go, but as she thought about it, she just felt like she shouldn't, and she needs to do what's best for her. So she wants him to let her go. And as she's saying this, there's tears in her eyes. And I don't quite understand if the tears are because she really didn't want him to go or because she knew she was hurting him. I don't get it. You all tell me what you think it was. She says, let me go. I'm comfortable and content. The guy upstairs sees me for who I am and does not want me to change. He doesn't want me to put on stupid dresses. He doesn't want me to go to dumb balls. He accepts me for me. And as I was saying it and hearing her, I was like, okay, this is where the phrase, you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. That's where the phrase came from, because the way she was like, I was like, girl, he's telling you he wants to be with you. But I guess because she knows how society is, and because at that point he's had so many broken promises, she tells him to go. And this is the first time I felt bad for Anthony, because you could tell he was heartbroken. We see Daphne and Simon talking pleasantly right before the ball. They negotiate how many dances they'll do. They laugh as Daphne thanks him for how he was with her siblings, and they agree overall to one last dance. The people are arriving, including Eloise, who's very uncomfortable in her corset and dress, because her mother is trying to now prepare her for the upcoming season, because the next time they have a season, Eloise is going to have to come out. Lady Featherton arrives, and she's approached by the gossiping ladies like Cressida's mom, who basically want to know what she's doing there. And she lets them know that she was welcomed there by the Duchess herself. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, Lord Featherington is somewhere else, and he's drunk, and he's walking down a hallway, and he enters a room where the two men, the bookies, that he cheated are sitting there with a green bottle in hand. We come back to the ball, where there's a lot going on. Eloise ends up finding out where Whistledown gets her newsletter printed, and that the Queen is planning to catch her. She finds this out from her right-hand man, the one that the Queen previously said talks too much. So she leaves the ball because she still thinks that Lady Whistledown is actually Madame Delacroix. She rushes to the print shop to warn her of the scheme. We see a carriage. Eloise yells it's a setup, but Eloise does not see who's inside, and at that time neither did we. At the end of the episode, Eloise finds out that Benedict was with Madame Delacroix, but we'll get to it. What do my notes say? Oh, let's get back to the ball for now. We see Lady Danbury approach Simon. I presume your plans to separate from Her Grace have not yet changed. He says they have not. Neither, it appears, has your ability to somehow hear every piece of gossip that transpires in this town. She says, when will you accept it? That I know all. Pride, Your Grace, it will cost you everything and leave you with nothing. You must not allow it to happen to you, because she sees he has his love match, and she likes Daphne for him, and she wants Daphne for him, but she wants the Grace to fight for it himself. As she's having that conversation, you see him looking on at Daphne, and Daphne and her mother are having their own discussion. We agreed to dance tonight, a waltz. Lady Bridgerton says, I miss dancing with your father. The very last time I danced with him at a ball, there were peacocks present, I believe, real ones. I suppose I miss everything about him, really. Daphne says the two of you loved each other so very much. It's a rarity I've come to realize. Lady Bridgerton says, that is not to say it wasn't without its trials. Your father and I faced many difficulties indeed, but we overcame them. We made a decision early on to do so. Daphne says, Mama, I don't think. Lady Bridgerton says, we choose to love each other every single day. We chose to love each other every single day. It is a choice, dearest, one that is never too late to make. I may never be able to see your father again. I may wake up every morning and touch the pillow where he used to lay his head. But knowing that the two of us made the choice to love and to do all that we could, well, I cannot tell you how much peace and comfort that brings to me. Daphne says, I wish there was something, Mama. I wish I could do this. She says, you're a Bridgerton. There's nothing you can't do. We then see Simon and Daphne come to the middle of the dance floor, and immediately as they prepare to dance, everyone looks on. And because these two are so connected to one another, and they're in each other's arms while they're strolling along the dance floor, the both of them manage to let their guard down. And right when they do, it starts pouring rain. So everyone else is scattering because they want cover, but Daphne is standing out in the rain, allowing it to wash over her, messing up her hair, messing up the portrait that was done, getting people's clothes wet. She's just standing there embracing it. And he's looking on, and you hear Lady Danbury tell everyone that the evening is complete and they need to go. We then get a conversation that has to be read. Daphne says, Daphne, he says, I am so sorry. She says, for what? Even a duke cannot control the weather. He says, I know that this is not what you had envisioned for the evening. She says, certainly not. He says, and for that, she says, it's better. I know why you made that vow to your father. I found the letters you wrote to him as a child, and I read them. He says, Daphne. She says, just because something is not perfect does not make it any less worthy of love. Your father made you believe otherwise. He made you believe that you needed to be without fault in order to be loved, but he was wrong. Should you need any proof of the matter, then just look here. I am tired of pretending, and I cannot continue acting as if I do not love you, because I do. I love all of you, even the parts that you believe are too dark and too shameful. Every scar, every flaw, every imperfection, I love you. You may think that you are too damaged and too broken to ever allow yourself to be happy, but you can choose differently, Simon. You can choose to love me as I love you. That should not be up to anyone else. That cannot be up to anyone else. It can only be up to you. Y'all, the first time I slapped the mess out of my leg. I really did. It was like, boom. The first time I saw this scene, I cried because I felt how much she loved him. I felt how much she was longing for him. I felt how much she just wanted her husband to be her husband and to stop this mess. And he just stood there just watching her walk away. So she walks away. We then see the Featheringtons return home. And as they return home, they're excited, they're happy, they're talking about the stuff that's going on. I think Prudence is talking about Mr. Finch because they actually got together, and now she feels like she can actually pursue him because of the dowry and whatever else. And the staff is all standing there looking sad. So she thinks, Lady Featherington, that something happened to Miss Thompson. So she is like Miss Thompson, but then she sees Miss Thompson walk down the stairs and she's looking like, what in the world? And she is told that her husband is dead. We then see her immediately rush to his office because she wants to make sure that all the earnings that he got from the matches were still there. And she opens up the drawer, pulls open the bag, and there's not a slip in sight. They are gone, and she is crying. Lord Featherington is killed, obviously, by the bookies because they caught that he fixed that match, because he couldn't have been more obvious about it, which made me wonder what would happen to Will. I mean, how obvious can you be if you've never reached out to bookies of that caliber before that could cover that cost, and then you finally do, and the day that you finally do, that you go as far as to giving them the deed to your house, the person who normally wins loses. We find out later that Lady Featherington is looking for the heir to their household because with the way things are set up, you have to have a male in the household for the next in line to come. And all he had was girls, so it's going to be left to someone else, but we don't get to see it. Back to the Duke. Simon, I don't know if it's the next day. I don't know if it's later that night because we're not given a time period. But he walks in and tells Daphne that he wants to be with her, but he doesn't know how to be the man that she deserves. She tells him that the only thing they could do is try their best because their love is what matters. And then the heavy breathing and the kissing ensues. The music plays as Daphne and Simon practice making babies. So they have sex and it is like really intense. Even the violin in the background is playing and the violins are excited just like they are. And we see that this time he does not allow his seed to drop on the bed or the floor. He allows it to remain in her. So they're happy and they end up going at it again. We then hear Lady Whistledown. If there is ever to be a grander finish to a season than the one provided by the Duke and the Duchess of Hastings this year, this author will need to feast upon her own words. For it was this couple's memorable affair that brought another scandalous London season to a close. As many now leave the city behind for greener pastures, some endings seem more permanent than others. And this is when we see Colin outside looking like he's getting ready to leave. And that's where we see Eloise being there for Penelope as she cries. But I'm not sure if she's crying about her father or if she's crying about Colin leaving. Lady Whistledown continues, "Of course, there are other endings that will offer new beginnings. However uncertain these new beginnings might be, as Lady Featherington finds out from her maid who is taking over their estate on that piece of paper, and Colin tells them, he shall write while he's in Greece. Anthony lets them know that it's time for him to find his Viscountess and that he realizes that he needs to take the romance out of it when he does so. And Daphne and Simon are looking at him like, good luck with that. Eloise finds out by talking to her brother that Lady Whistledown is not Madame Delacroix because Madame Delacroix left for France. And he was there last night saying goodbye to her, which means she couldn't have been there when she went to warn her. So you hear Lady de Whistledown say, "There is no ending in sight for this author who recently became aware of a scheme to unmask her." You hear Eloise from the previous night say, "Lady Whistledown, go, it's a trap." "By one worthy opponent indeed. Perhaps I will come forward one day, though you must know, dear reader, the decision shall be left entirely up to me. Yours truly, Lady Whistledown." And this is when we see that Lady Whistledown is someone, if I'm honest, I didn't suspect until later on, and that she is Penelope. Tell me down in the comments that before watching this season, or for those of you who haven't watched before, heard this season, did you all have an idea of who it was? Because I thought that it was going to be the maid that works with Lady Featherington. But then I realized, wait, how could it be her unless they came back and told things that happened at the ball, because she wasn't there for certain things. Anyways, Penelope is Lady Whistledown. So after that, you hear screams and you hear somebody saying, "Push, push." We see Daphne and she's giving birth. Her mother is holding one hand. Simon is on the opposite side holding the other. She pushes several times and she has a baby. We find out it's a boy. She holds him first, and then she asks Simon if he would like to hold him, and he holds him. She says we have to name him, and he tells her whatever that name will be, I believe that it needs to start with the letter A. After all, we do have traditions, don't we? And they laugh. And that is because we know that in the Bridgerton household, they name their kids in alphabetical order. So the oldest will be A, B, C, and so on and so forth. And so forth. And that is the end. And we see a little bee buzzing by because apparently there's some significance to the bee in this series. Like the bee appears when there's love matches and all those other things. But that's the end. You all, tell me what you thought of this episode and this season. I'm going to go ahead and begin season 2 next. I hope to have out a video. Can't make any promises. I hope to have out another video. Hopefully, let's say Tuesday. I might be able to do it a little bit before, depending on what my weekend is looking like, because the graduation activities are beginning. If not, definitely by Tuesday, it will be up. Thank you so much for joining me for this season of Bridgerton, and I look forward to reviewing season 2 with you. Like the video, it helps the channel. Comment, and if you've been here for more than 10 minutes, well, let me not say 10 minutes, because sometimes you might not like something after 10 minutes. If you've been here for more than one episode, go ahead and subscribe. It helps me out, y'all. Until next time.